So place your hands on your neck here. And just allow yourself to relax here, to soften yourself. And consider each finger relative to the floor. What's the distance between each side of your head where it's joining onto the spine and the floor? Does it feel the same, or does one side feel closer? And let your hands down. In fact, place your hands on the top of the pelvis and just get a sense of where your, each bony wing of the pelvis sits relative to the floor. Does one side feel higher? And you could probably remember the sensation of your hands on the base of your skull there. What's the distance between each hip and the sides of your neck? And as you tune in now, just spread your attention now to notice if there's anywhere where you're holding yourself in order to focus. And just observe it. Place your attention there without it moving, and just notice the sensations of those areas that are braced, quite possibly in the rib cage. Maybe it's more over to one side. Could be in your legs. And once again, notice that postural sway. And the interesting thing about primary control is it's organizing our body relative to gravity, because we live in this field of gravity that's pulling us down into the center of the earth. So just above where you are holding there, just in the inner ear, in the bones of the skull, you have the primary organ of balance, the semicircular canals. They're looking for level. That's relative to the center of the earth. And the place where the skull is supported is here, but the center of gravity of the skull is in front of that. It's in front of the ears. So the weight of the head is falling forward. That's its natural resting place. If you just let it go, it'll go down like this. So head balance is this dynamic equilibrium, so that we have this tiny feedback loop that goes between the tiny muscles at the base of the skull here and the brain stem. So when the head falls forward, those muscles are stretched. They send a signal, about that far, into the brain stem. It says, I've been stretched. What do you want me to do? And then the brain stem sends a signal directly back saying, tighten up. So it goes, okay, pulls up this way. And then the ones in the front are stretched, and they send a signal into the brain stem, and then it goes this way. So, it's only a feedback loop about that long, and it's traveling at 20 or 30 meters per second. You cannot possibly control it. You can't do it. You have to allow it to be there. You have to just allow it to happen. So it's the skull being able to move on top of that top vertebra here that's really at the heart of this whole story. But it's sitting on top of the whole spine, the whole body. So allowing your head to be free here, so it can move delicately on top of your neck no matter what you're doing, is the goal of this. Consider a seal arcing through water. You know how exquisite that motion is. And it's leading with its nose. And the nose goes down here and it comes up, and the whole body follows in that way. So we have the same situation going through here when we're standing. We have this movement up. Whatever we're doing, we're looking how can we organize our body so that we're still oriented, so that gravity will go down, the force of gravity will go through our body evenly, so that when we're standing we have the weight, balanced, and we can move effectively with the minimum amount of tension. Because if you, for instance, lean back with your chest, which is overwhelmingly what I see many people with back pain do, that immediately means you need to tighten up to compensate in some parts of your tension. And that compensation becomes, postural tension. It's there all the time. It influences the way the person moves, stops it being efficient. It's extra effort. So they lose that sense of balance. With our balance, if you're in the middle, if you're aligned so that your head, chest and pelvis are balanced over the whole of each foot, then there's this movement of your head going forward and up this way. There's a movement on the ankles of the body shifting this way and that way, and on the knees and the hips. There's these very small little movements that are constantly adjusting, and it's this capacity to adjust through the whole body that gives us the freedom and the delicacy of our balance. And when I was young, the nature of this arc and where the middle of that arc is the thing that really is what we're looking for in this. When I was young, I remember watching bricklayers unloading bricks. They used to be delivered on a truck. And they had these leather mitts they'd put in their hands, and they'd reach across and they'd get a stack of about 5, and then they'd throw them, and someone else standing by the road would catch them, and then they'd stack them down on the ground. And so the bricks would move in an arc like this, up and down. And if you catch those bricks when they're in the middle, they're weightless. If you catch them on the way down, you can feel their weight. And that's what we're doing with this primary control, is we're learning to sense when your head is in the middle, when all of the joints through your body are in the middle of their axis, you have this weightlessness. So that's what we're looking for. And it's something that you allow the body to do. So stand here now with your arms by your side. And just tune in, spread your attention from your head right through the torso to the front and back of your pelvis, front and back of your feet. And just bend your knees again and just see how you can bend slowly in a way that enables you to spread your attention through the whole body and to minimize any bracing. Now, once again, place your hands on the top of your hips. Thumbs are sort of at the back. That's near the sacrum. And, where the fingers will go to, sort of in the middle of between the front and the back, that's where the front of the lumbar vertebra comes to. It's quite big. And you've got those bony processes at the back, the spinous processes here, and then the body of the vertebra is about halfway through here. And it comes up through the middle of your body. They become more slender when they come into the rib cage, because we've got the ribs on either side, and then more slender still when they come up to the neck. And you can feel the depth of your spine. If you come up to here to your head, feel your head here, and feel down the sides of your neck at the bones there. Right down the side, and think, place your hands on the back. Feel on either side, you've got the, the back of the neck, you've got the little bony bits you can feel, the spinous processes, and then on either side you've got these two large bands of muscle. Come right up to the base of your head and down onto the shoulders. And that muscle continues all the way down the back, down through the ribs, in the lower back and onto the pelvis. And then, the front and the back of the pelvis, those big muscles we saw, and then right through the legs to the feet. So that's one system there, the front and back of the spine that the head sits on. And the other one is the jaw, the face. Place your hands here, under the jaws, the base of the neck, and move your jaw side to side. Slowly. Sense the space inside your mouth. Maybe you can feel your tongue. It's attached to the bottom of the jaw, to the bottom jaw, and it's attached to the top of the larynx. Maybe you could feel your larynx and the throat, the trachea moving side to side as you move your jaw. Of course, the more you soften in your arms and shoulders, the easier that will become. And then right down into the tube of the gut, from the tongue, right down through the esophagus into the stomach and through the whole digestive tract. Right down into your pelvis. And now lift your head up and down. Do that tilting motion again, I should say, that tilting motion, and notice you're tilting your face. And remember where your fingers are, that's where the skull joint's on. But if you get your little fingers and put them on your cheekbones at the side, you see that's above where your head is supported. So feel that space inside the mouth, inside the back of the nose, and right through the throat and the rib cage into the gut, right down to the pelvis. Lovely. Leave that now with your arms there. Notice what you feel standing here now. Soles of your feet up to the crown of your head. And the volume of your body now. And just walk a little bit and notice that balance of your skull on top of your spine. It's amazing to reflect that we're standing on a ball that's traveling 16,000 kilometers an hour in the direction of the east, and then hurtling through space at 160,000 kilometers an hour around the sun. And so we're making an arc, and our head is the steering wheel for going up. And it's that delicate balance of the head on top of the spine, this ability for the head to move and adapt itself to whichever way the rest of your body is moving. That is the thing that will determine the ease and efficiency of the way you move. Now you need to walk slowly and place each foot down. And then you may notice that each side is a little bit different. Because if we, carry tensions in our body, that don't directly serve any purpose, other than bracing ourselves in a particular way, that interferes or changes the quality of the way we move. So it's a matter of finding how to move with that. So look, could you come and lie down on the floor now? Lovely. And take a moment just to sense how that is. Okay. Notice how you settle. The feeling of your breath. And it's amazing to think that your breath works with your heart. So, that as you breathe in, the oxygen you breathe in is carried through the bloodstream to your extremities. See if you can sense that. The beating of your heart. Pushing the blood right through your body in time with your breath. And could you move your fingers and your toes with the movement of your breath? So just notice the way you're moving as you're breathing. It's a tiny breath. You're just lying on the floor. You don't need to be breathing very much. And move your fingers the same distance. So when you breathe in, you move them one way. When you breathe out, you breathe in the other way. Move them in the other way. And notice how lovely it is, that transition between inhalation and exhalation and exhalation and inhalation. It's a still point. Similar to that still point, when your head's in the middle of its arc and it's right in the up part, the weightless part. And notice the inside and outside of the feet and hands. The little fingers and the thumbs, the little toes and the big toes. When you can follow that sense of the inside and outside through to the heels of the hands and the heels of the feet, and through to the inside and outside of the legs and your arms. To where they connect onto the torso. Front and back of the pelvis. and pubic bone at the front and the sacrum at the back of the pelvis. And the sitting bones are in the middle. Maybe if you contract and relax your pelvic floor, once again in harmony with your breathing, you can get a sense of the depth from front to back of the pelvic floor. And you can sense maybe where the sitting bones are, and where the hip sockets are. And it's an interesting thing that the pelvic floor, it comes right up to either side of the sacrum. In fact, can you place your hands now, palm down, underneath your pelvis? Palm down underneath your pelvis, so they're on either side of the sacrum. And just feel the way you move as you breathe there. Can you feel the way as you breathe in and the torso expands, the pressure on your hands? So, that's higher at the back than it is at the front. The sides of the sacrum are higher at the back than the pubic bone is at the front. And if you sense through the front and back of the torso, up from the pelvis and the pubic bone and back of the wings of the pelvis, up through the rib cage, and up to your head, we'll find something really interesting. But before we get to the head, could you consider the front and back of the underarms? From the little fingers through to the back of the underarms, back of the shoulder girdle, on each side, and from the thumb and first fingers through to the front of the underarm, collarbone. You see, thinking of the whole depth of the torso there, from the front and back of the pelvis and the front and back of the rib cage. And now back to that curious thing, inside the neck and the head. And, inside the pelvic floor at the back is higher at the back and lower at the front. But if we consider the top of that whole visceral space, which is the top of the visceral cranium, the front is higher than the back. So, the back wall of the throat, that comes back down into the front of the back of the rib cage and the whole back of the torso down to the front of the pelvis. And then it comes up, back up, if you come back up there and back into the back wall of the throat, to the back wall of the nose, and then it goes forward around the roof of the nose and then out through the nose itself. And remember that the back of the skull, from behind the spine, that's at the level of the bottom of your ears and the bottom of your nose. So the base of the skull goes from the base of the nose, the base of the ears, and then it comes inside the head, and then it goes up and goes to the top of the nose, the back of the nose, and then across the top of the nose, right out to the cheekbones there. So sense that space now inside your torso, the head, neck, and torso. From the top of the nose, down the throat into the rib cage. And of course, it feels like space, but it's absolutely chock-a-block with stuff. Apart from the trachea, which has air in it. So think of that. And could you move your jaw side to side? Tiny movement. And the top of the jaw, the lower jaw, sits right where the skull joins onto the spine. Maybe moving your jaw around like this enables you to feel the space inside the nose and mouth and throat. And down into the whole visceral space and the gut. But maybe you could also feel the muscle connecting to the back of the skull at the back of the neck. And in fact, could you now leave the jaw movement and just make the tiniest movement of the top of your neck? It's like you're lifting your nose up and then you're bringing it down. It's as if when you bring it down, as if you're going, no. And when you're going forward, it's going, really? But a tiny, tiny movement. See if you can sense where is that spot that the skull joins onto the spine. And by the way, if you're uncomfortable having your hands under your pelvis, you can move them too. We will soon anyway, but don't wait for me to say change position if you're uncomfortable. Make sure that you're comfortable. But continue then with this tiny movement, seeing if you can feel where the skull joins onto the spine. And the influence through the whole body. And relative to up, where is your head moving now? That little movement you're making with the base of your skull up and down, is it going straight up or is it going off to one side? Don't try and change it if it is. It's fine. If it's going off to one side, it means that the muscles on one side of the body are organized a little differently. They're a bit tighter. Just feel where it's going. And this is the curious thing. Another curious thing. Can you feel, even with this tiny movement, that, right down the back, you can feel the effect of that. Maybe you can feel your rib cage moving slightly. Maybe you can even feel that right down to your pelvis. Well, leave that. Let your arms by your side or wherever they're comfortable, and just notice what you feel now. One of the essential skills in this work is being able to focus your attention on sensations in the body and to keep it there, so that you notice the sensations and without correcting them, one of the jewels that Feldenkrais brought into the world, this idea of, or articulated, that idea of paying attention to what's happening within you without trying to correct it. Actually, it's not just within you, it's paying attention to what's happening anywhere without trying to correct it. And the other skill is, our focus will often come to one part of the body, but can we spread our focus so it includes the whole body and sustain our attention there? And rather than ruminating about or thinking about or going off on other flights of interpretation, to just follow the ever-changing sensations. And to notice how the quality of our body's organization develops. Your capacity to sense the inside and out of the feet and the hands, little and big thumbs and fingers, right up through the inside and outside of the arm and the front and back of the torso. The whole body is a three-dimensional structure. And once again, move your head up and down, the base of your head. And could you take one hand, or in fact take both hands, or one if only one is comfortable, and place them on the crown of your head. And continue lifting up the lower part of the head. Tiny movement in harmony with your breath. So you get a sense of the size of the whole head. Where is do you have your head right on the center of the top of the head? Or could you move your head, the base of your head, side to side? It's like you're moving the bottom of the ears over to one side. Like you say, what? Turn your head over to where the person is speaking. Tiny, tiny movement. And feel what it's like to move your head side to side here. That's moving the top of your neck side to side. And spread your attention so that you feel through the front and the back of the neck. So you've got, that point. Well, in fact, place your head now on the base of the neck. Not your head, your hands, your fingers on the base of the skull, just under the ears, and continue moving the top of the neck side to side, the ears side to side. Let your arms go. You can probably still remember the sensation of your fingers on the top of your head. And you can probably feel what's going on in your torso. Now, this may not be an easy movement for you if it's unfamiliar. Might be really easy, but if it's not, don't force it. Just go slowly and, notice if you are bracing yourself in order to do it or to feel. Just do less. Tiniest movement. So sensing the connection of your head here. The cranial skeleton with the brain, and the rest of the central nervous system going right down through the spinal column, down to the sacrum. And then the visceral cranium in the front. higher in the front than at the back, the base of the skull. And then sense right down into your pelvis. You know where the bottom of the pelvis is higher at the back. Well, the pelvic floor is higher at the back than it is at the front, the opposite of the head. Get a sense of that space there. And you could let your arms down by your side now and just get a sense of that whole three-dimensional space. Moving your head side to side in a way that enables you to soften. So it's a tiny movement. Rest for a moment. Now once again, move the base of your skull side to side. So one ear goes over to the right, and then the left ear or the ears go over to the left. And you're moving the base of the skull side to side. The top of the head is, no, sorry, the back of the head still sitting on the floor. And, you know, now that you've relaxed, maybe you could be aware of what's going on through the rest of your body. You know, the weight of your body is pressing down on the suit of skin in contact with the floor. So the skin is staying where it is, but quite possibly you feel the rest of the skeleton sliding around within the suit of skin. Nice sort of slippery feeling. And as you move the head over to the left, notice what the left hip does. And then as you move the head over to the right, what the right hip does. You know, because we're moving the top of the spine side to side. And if we're moving one part of the spine, probably the rest of the spine is being moved as well. And it's like our neck is being drawn over to the right when our head goes to the right. And over to the left when our head moves to the left. What happens to your pelvis? You know, when the top of your head moves over to the left, what does the coccyx do, the base of the sacrum? Does it point over to the left too? You know, do you feel when your head, the top of the base of the head goes over to the right, does the right side of your pelvis lift up a little bit on that side? You know, does this, when your head and the tip of the sacrum move over to one side, does that side shorten and the other side lengthen? Well, leave that for a moment and rest. Now once again, place your hands underneath your pelvis, palms down. Get a sense of the back of the body, and the two parts of the skull, the cranial skull and the spine. You think of the curve of the neck in one direction, curve of the rib cage in the other, curve of the lumbar spine, like the neck, and then the curve of the sacrum. Consider the front and back of the underarms, front and back of your pelvis. Inside and outside of the limbs, hands and feet. And now once again, move the top of your neck, the base of your skull, side to side. And with your hands in your pelvis now, under the pelvis, can you feel that movement through the spine, through the back? Go slowly here and allow yourself to soften. And if you notice that you're tight, you can't go as far on one side, don't push through that. Just move within the comfortable range so that you can get a sense of the circular nature of the movement. The whole of your body is undulating in this way. And even though we're moving the bottom of the head side to side, sense the top of your neck, top of your head. And now once again, leave that, but move the base of your head up and down. And notice with your hands here under your pelvis, do you feel as you're lifting up the base of your head, up and down, that your pelvis is moving too? Sense the top of your head. Imagine you're steering with the top of your head and you're like a seal. We're flying through the air or flying through water. And lift the head, the base of the head slowly. Or it's like, you're steering with the top of the head now. Allowing the rest of your body to move. And when the top of the head points down, it's like you dive down into the water. And as it's coming back up again, you make that beautiful arc and then fly out of the water and then turn back down and in. And just feel the way your head can move in one direction, the whole body can follow. And you could change the direction you travel by moving your head a little bit over to one side. So you could be like a seal swimming freely through the water. And whichever way your head points, the rest of the body can follow. You could even try moving your head sideways now. The base of your head, the top of the head goes sideways. Think of that, the top of your head turning side to side and the rest of your spine being able to follow. And then leave that. Take your hands out and rest there. Then lift your knees up. Lift your knees up. Stand your feet on the floor. And how was that? Were you able to keep your neck free? And let's consider now the third arm. Use the back and the front of the spine, visceral and the skull and the gut and the cranial skull and the spine and the muscles in the back. And now there's the senses, there's the environment. So notice your eyes sitting inside the skull. How they sit, the feeling in each eye. How they sit within that visceral cavity in the skull. And hearing. Relates to all the bones. The bones are great conductors of sound. And taste, the taste inside the viscera, inside you, and the smell. And that delicate balance of the skull on the spine. And now, here is this interesting thing. If you roll over to the side, roll over onto your side, notice what happens in your neck. Go side to side. Now, you could lift your legs into the air if you like, so that you could use the weight of your legs to carry you over. Move your arms and your hands, lift your arms and legs into the air and use the weight of the arms to carry you, so you don't need to do any lifting. And notice there comes a certain point where you go onto your side where the head needs to lift. And notice as you do that, whether you tighten in the neck, could you think of lengthening? Or could you remember that delicate forward and up movement of the skull on top of the spine as you lift your head? It's the thing that coordinates our movement. And we're sensing the back of the skull, in the back of the spine, all that muscle right around the torso. And we're sensing the visceral skull and the senses, like the owl landing, looking at its environment. Now we're sensing our environment. And come up to sit. Come up to sit on the ground in whichever way is comfortable. You could have your legs, in fact, have your legs splayed to the side. So either direction doesn't matter, but so that the knees are point, both lower legs point in one direction. You could have your hands on the floor and sense in this orientation your skull, the bottom of the skull, top of the skull, and just consider that delicate balance. Remember, you can't do it. You have to just listen for it. It goes on all the time. Sense, and just move the bottom of the skull side to side a little bit. Sense the whole base of the skull, back of the skull and back of the neck, front of the underside of the skull, back of the nose and the top of the inside of the nose. And right down to your pelvis, even with this tiny movement, notice how the pelvis is shifting. And that whole visceral space, in the skull higher in the front and lower at the back, well, back of the head, and in the pelvic floor, higher at the back and lower in the front. And you see, thinking of the whole tube of the torso as you move the top of the head side to side. Move it forward and back. And allow the rest of your body to adjust. Lovely. And come onto your hands and knees and do that. Take a while to do that, actually, because this is what Alexander noticed. This was one of his major insights, that he had this voice problem, and every time he discovered, when he looked, that every time he went to speak, he'd tighten himself up in a way that really interfered with the mechanism. But even though it was through his whole body and his breathing that the interference was happening, the neck was the first place to tighten. And rather than, allowing your head to be freely balanced on top of the spine, he'd tighten it and pull it back and down. So, just sit here for a second and then just go to come onto your hands and knees. But if you feel any tension in the back of your neck or anything that would be interfering with the delicate balance of your head, stop. And then try again and see if you can find a way of allowing, the whole head, the top of the head, to be moving still as you come forward. And you can spend a long time doing this with great benefit. Going to move, and then if you sense any interference with that delicate head balance, stop. Come back to stillness, and then try it again. That's one take on how Alexander solved his voice problem. There's another element, but I won't go into that now. But sense now, actually come onto your hands and knees and think of the capacity of your spine to lengthen. Sense that, like that dove in the beginning of the lesson that we saw, its head and torso, the rest of its body, so long and soft as its wings moved through the air. And now come up to stand, remembering the way that owl landed, allowing the head to be balanced and organized. On top of the spine, and just come up to stand and sense how it is. the weight on your feet. Sense of where the skull is, the bottom of the skull, the back and the front. How the skull moves on top of the spine. And its relationship with the rest of your body. Spine and the gut. Front and back of the pelvis. The underarms. And the whole of each hand and foot. And then try walking now and just notice how it is. Your capacity to feel. Or tune into that delicate balance of your head and the sense of connection with the rest of your body and your environment. That's lovely.
Really nice, David. Really nice.
Thank you, Janine.
It feels like it was